Caitlin Clark is on the floor at Gainbridge Fieldhouse, flat on her back in a scramble for a loose ball, and a fist comes down on her throat. No whistle, no flag. Play just keeps going, like nothing happened, while the most valuable player this league has ever marketed lies there with a hand at her neck. That was Wednesday night, and the woman who promised to protect her runs the front office that left her exposed. Her name is Kelly Krauskopf. She's the president of basketball operations for the Indiana Fever, the executive who came back to this franchise to build a roster around Caitlin Clark and keep her safe. We'll get to that promise. First, you need to see what the league itself said about that hit. Because here's the number that matters, and it isn't a dollar figure. 1 game. That's the suspension the WNBA handed down the next day, after it reviewed the play and upgraded it to a flagrant foul 2, ruling that Alyssa Thomas had recklessly made contact with her fist to the throat area and calling it, in the league's own words, a non-basketball act. 1 game, $1,000 fine for a hand to the throat of the face of the league. Now hold that next to this. 2 days before, Caitlin Clark picked up a technical foul for clapping toward the Phoenix bench after an exchange with Dewana Bonner. The Fever asked the league to rescind it. The league said no. So let that settle for a second. Clark's applause got reviewed and upheld, while a fist to her windpipe got 1 game and $1,000, and it gets sharper. That technical was Clark's 5th of the season. At 8, the rules trigger an automatic 1-game suspension. So, one of the most targeted players in the league is now 3 claps, 3 frustrated reactions away from being benched by the very system that just gave a throat shot a single game off. We'll come back to that asymmetry. It tells you everything about whose comfort this league is actually protecting. Now, here's where it gets uncomfortable for the people who built this team. Because this wasn't a freak accident. Ask the one person on that roster willing to say it out loud. Sophie Cunningham went on her podcast, Show Me Something, this past weekend and said the quiet part into a microphone. She said none of the Fever even saw the throat contact happen in real time. If they had, in her words, they would have had Clark's back. And then she said the thing that's been sitting under this whole season like a fault line, that opponents are definitely targeting Clark, and that the league and the refs do nothing to protect her. Sit with that. That's not a fan on social media. That's not a hot take from a studio desk. That's Clark's own teammate on the record saying the most marketable athlete in women's basketball is being hunted, and the people whose job is to protect her are looking the other way. Don't mistake Cunningham for the villain here. She's the witness, the one who stood next to Clark all season and finally said out loud what the tape's been screaming the whole time. And the tape is long. Game after game, Clark gets left one-on-one out on the perimeter, isolated with no help, while defenders take their shot at her, sometimes literally. The hit history is documented and it's ugly. Carter, DeShields, Sheldon, Mabry. The bumps, the body checks, the shoves away from the ball. It's been building for more than a year. Now it's a fist to the throat, and a 1-game suspension, and a teammate telling you on a podcast that nobody's coming to help. You start to see the shape of it. Clark isn't being defended, Clark is being survived. So let's be precise about what the league did and didn't do, because this is where the story gets twisted into something it isn't. The WNBA did act. It reviewed the play, it upgraded the foul, it used the words non-basketball act, and it sat Thomas for a game. In real time, there was no foul, none called on the floor when it happened, but on review, the league agreed it crossed a line. That matters. Hold on to it. Here's the trap, though. It would be easy to stand here and say the league did nothing, that the whole institution is rigged against Clark. But that reading falls apart the second you check the record. The league penalty is the receipt. It's the proof. The people who run this sport looked at that play in slow motion and admitted on paper that a hand went to Caitlin Clark's throat in a way that has no place in basketball. And here's the part that should make every Fever fan sit up. Even after the league admitted that, even with that on the record, the person whose entire job was to make sure Clark never ended up that exposed had already left her there. That's the asymmetry. The league can suspend the player who did it. The league can fine her. What the league can't do is build Indiana a roster. That was somebody else's promise, and that's the person this story is actually about. When Kelly Krauskopf came back to the Indiana Fever as president of basketball operations, she said the right things. She went on the record about Caitlin Clark, about adding ball handlers around her, about playing Clark off the ball so she wouldn't have to create everything herself, about protecting her health and her workload. The whole pitch was protection. Build around the franchise player, take the target off her back, make sure she's never the only one out there. Read that promise again and then look at Wednesday night. Look at a season of Clark stranded one-on-one with no help. Look at a fist reaching her throat with not a single teammate close enough to step in. That's not a coaching failure. Stephanie White has defended Clark publicly, called the cheap shots exactly what they are. The coach can only play the players she's handed. The question is, who handed them to her? Indiana's president of basketball operations is Kelly Krauskopf, and her front office approved this roster. Amber Cox runs the day-to-day as general manager, but the blueprint, the promise, the vision for protecting Clark, that traces back to Krauskopf. She told everyone she'd build a fortress. What she actually built was a player on an island, surrounded by the most physical defense in the league, with the league's own paperwork now confirming that at least one of those hits had no business happening. There's a line that cuts through all of it, and it comes straight from the fans who watch every possession. They keep saying the same thing in the comments. Clark doesn't want to be babied. She wants equal treatment, not preferential treatment. Nobody's asking for Clark to get a force field. They're asking for the same protection any superstar in any league gets as a matter of course, and for a front office that promised exactly that to actually deliver it. So what did it cost on the court? Clark tweaked her back in the second quarter on a three-point attempt where she got fouled, gutted it out for a while, then left the game in the third. She still finished with 19 points and 8 assists in about 20 minutes. That's the cruel part. She was playing some of the best basketball of her career when it happened. Indiana lost that one, 111 to 109. By the weekend, White ruled her out for the next home game against the LA Sparks, with no real timeline given. The Fever then have a stretch off before they're back on the floor. Clark's likely return is the trip to Las Vegas to face the Aces. So the franchise player watches from the bench while the league moves on, and the front office that promised to protect her says nothing. And the fans? The fans are done waiting for somebody to say it for them. There's a real growing movement among Fever supporters right now. Fans openly saying they're finished, that they'll stop buying tickets, that the organization shouldn't get their money until it starts protecting the player they show up for. You see it in the comment sections. You see it in the threads. I go wherever Caitlin Clark goes, and a lot of them are saying that for now, Caitlin Clark goes nowhere they have to pay for. That's the one card the audience actually holds, and they know it. One hit on one Wednesday night stopped being the whole story a while ago. The real question now is whether the people who run this franchise believe their best customers' loyalty is unlimited. The fans are telling them it isn't. Here's what makes this sting for anyone who's followed this franchise long enough. Indiana used to know how to do this. For the better part of a decade, the Fever were Tamika Catchings, and the entire organization was built around protecting her. She was the identity, the franchise player, the one everybody else was assembled to support and shield. The front office understood that when you have a generational talent wearing your jersey, the job is to build a fortress around her, to manage her body, to surround her with help, to make sure she's never the only one out there absorbing the punishment. That was the Indiana way. They wrote the book on it. So what changed? Same city, same building. The same franchise that once knew exactly how to wrap its arms around its star now has the most marketable player in the history of the sport getting hit in the throat with no whistle and no help, while the executive who promised to protect her runs the front office. Indiana had the blueprint. They had it for years. The question isn't whether they know how to build a fortress around a franchise player. They've done it before. The question is why they didn't do it for Caitlin Clark. She'll be back on the floor soon enough. The back will heal. The suspension's already served, but the island's still there. And until somebody in that front office decides to build her a roster that actually protects her, every time Caitlin Clark gets up off that floor, the same question gets louder. Who's supposed to be standing next to her? And why does she keep getting left out there alone?